no introduction, and so we were just going to let her go. But you know, I was thinking about some words to introduce Julie. I've known her since 1998, and you know, she is a leader in Indian education in Montana. This woman, you know, by her efforts and her leadership, has really helped to you know, shape the political and cultural and social you know, landscape in regards to what we teach about American Indians in schools all across the state of Montana. Um, you know, I was kind of lost hitchhiking down this Indian Ed road, and Julie took pity on me and picked me up and said, "Come on along on the journey." So thank you, Julie. It's a good journey to travel on with you. One thing you should know about Julie, though, she's so smart. It only takes her half an hour to watch 60 Minutes. I had to tell that one, Julie. But Julie was one of the original writers of the Essential Understandings. And you think about the impact of that document, not just here in Montana, but in other states and at the Museum of the American Indian. And Julie helped facilitate the writing of our original social studies lesson plans and has really helped out with our tribal histories. And so a lot of the curriculum that's been on our website, Julie's had a hand in it. And so it's just real honored to have her, you know, share her knowledge, wisdom, and, you know, just whatever she's going to say, I'm going to love it. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Julie. And thanks so much for being here with us today.
Oh, now. Chesquex Pesia. Good morning, everyone. Stemplu ul as buus. I extend our traditional greetings. What is in your heart? I was reading the participants as they came in, and I wanted to give a shout out to Eileen Plant. Hey, Nikki McClure, Aspen Many Hides, you know, people that have worked in my community. I saw Angela Archuleta, and I know an Archuleta from Taos, New Mexico. I don't know if you're related. And I saw that we have someone from Deutschland. We have somebody in from Germany. So Guten Tag. Ich wohne auf Zefen, 1976. I know that's broken German. I apologize, but Guten Tag, good day to you.
Excuse me, Julie. Julie, we left someone out this morning, and while we are saying good mornings, I am wondering if we can welcome on Pat Armstrong. He is actually officially opening the conference with a prayer. I'm so sorry that.
Okay, I wondered where that was. We had a joke.
We just got logged in. So Pat, if you're there, please forgive us for our oversight, and we are delighted that you're here. Oki, hello, so good to see you. So please, everyone, this is Pat Armstrong. He used to work for the Office of Public Instruction, and we are delighted to have him open our ceremony officially with good thoughts and a prayer and a song. Thank you, Pat.
Okay. Kitsiksa matsinno pinna nannoksistiko ne stokaak naatuusisah kumaapi. Ine pitana toi saamiaaki no kon kitopini tanaks pitaakin pisuatses. Kimos kitsepa pistaakin no to. Kinnenna naka kesksin matstahjope itoniop. Good morning, everybody. Damix kana donate. Kitsiksa matsit noksistiko. I thank you for having me here today and for starting things out with prayer. You know, indigenously, Native Americans always started things off with a prayer and good words. You know, before anything. You know, along with all our ceremonies, along with everything important that we do to encourage and instruct, to teach, to educate, anything that is passed down, transferred, is always opened with a prayer. So you know, just throwing that out there for everybody. Officially in this westernized world, I should say, my current title is assistant principal within the Browning Public Schools. My wife and I, we currently live in Heartbeat, Montana, together with our 3 children, Beat Ducky, Ryder, and also my youngest daughter, Pisuwats, this Morning Star. So I'm gonna start everything off with purpose, and give this conference something to kind of feed off and generate off, you know, good energy, I should say, good words. You know, as educators, our most powerful tool that we utilize is our voice. You know, it's utilized to educate, it's utilized to compliment, commend, to sing, and most importantly, to pray. And so that's why our voice is very, very powerful. And so we always must utilize it, be cognizant of how we utilize it. So bear with me as I say a prayer in my language, the Blackfoot language. He natusi, hoki napi natusi, hoki kepedaki akukumiki kisum, hoki pisuatses, hoki pai, paksi pisuatses somme manakapi, hoki puapski, hoki kakidanskas ma otto kinatsimui ka kimma pibit. Espomos esklimatstokiks, espomos esklimatstakios. Iskuna tapatsimui kasu kapi misami patapis no kak. Espomo kinanokskapi chimstananoksistiko, anokokwana kapinakosi. So kapi akutses misami patapis no kak. Espomos nakinenaks nenakiks. Iskuna tapatsimui ka espomo kinanokskapi chimstananoksistiko. Kestamatso kinasuksi patapis ni kamotaki oppokasam. Kimma pebet nokspomo kina kimma tokinan. Espomos nakamatapiks, espomos napikwaks. Espomos napiakiksi, espomos nakanitsitapiksi. Iskuna taapatsimmuika, espomos nakasikeitsetapis, espommokin kimmato, iskuna taapatsimmuika, espommokin anekskapi chimstananuksistiko, sokapi misami päätapis nokak, sokapi kakimai tanstawi päätapi, jo kimmapiibin, espommokin anoksistiko, sokapi akutses misami päätapis nokak. Kamo tannestu watsimani, misami päätapis, no naksäätapi. So I'm going to end off with a short song. The song is called the Warrior Society Song, and we usually customarily sing it for people that have acquired great deeds, you know, have accomplished a lot in life, and considering the fact that, you know, all the educators throughout the world, you know, and what we had to do in order to educate our young ones, you know, throughout this pandemic was, you know, it's going unacknowledged, you know, in a sense that acknowledge those that really stepped up to the plate to keep our children engaged and educated, you know, to really stand up front and stand there, you know, afraid, scared, unknowing what's going to happen with the sickness and whatnot, but also just to stand there with the courage enough to teach our young ones. So I sing this song in honor of all those that are educators and have used their voice to educate and utilize that tool to help our children out that way. Bear with me, I have overcoming a cold right now, so my voice is kind of raspy at the moment. So Okay, again. Turn it over you to there, Zach.
Pat, thank you so much. What an honor and just an uplifting to have your voice open our conference. It's very meaningful to begin in an Indigenous way. So thank you very much for taking a part in that. And it's just fantastic to see you anyway. And so thank you so much, Ixukapi, as Donnie says, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Please join us for any of the conference that you would like. And thank you again.
And I'll see you when I see you.
Yes, absolutely. All right, Julie, thank you so much for your flexibility in, let me get this unpinned here. There we go. Thank you so much for your flexibility in letting Pat open us officially.
Certainly. Lemlem's Pat. So I saw one other name that I want to call out, and that is Amy Williams. Bonjour, Amy. My father was from White Earth, so I'm glad you're here. But I would like to add some words to Pat's this morning, and that is through a poem from Simon Ortiz. And this is in his book, Woven Stone. And this poem is called Mid-America Prayer. Standing again within and among all things, standing with each other as sisters and brothers, mothers and fathers, daughters and sons, grandmothers and grandfathers, the past and present generations of our people, standing again within and among all items of life, the land, rivers, the mountains, plants, animals, all life that is around us, that we are included with, standing within the circle of the horizon, the day sky and the night sky, the sun, moon, the cycle of seasons, and the earth mother which sustains us, standing again with all things that have been in the past, that are in the present, and that will be in the future. We acknowledge ourselves to be in a relationship that is responsible and proper, that is loving and compassionate for the sake of the land and all the people. We ask humbly of the creative forces of life that we be given a portion with which to help ourselves so that our struggle and work will also be creative in the continuance of life, standing again within among all things. We ask in all sincerity for hope, courage, peace, strength, vision, unity, and continuance. Simon Ortiz, Mid-America Prayer. It's a privilege for me to be with you today. It's an honor to be with all of you. This is an auspicious moment for me to thank all of you for the work you have done to implement Indian education for all. When we put our minds and hearts together, we become an exponential force for good. So it's been 23 years, right? I want to spend the first time, part of our time together, to find a measure of how far we have come. And to do that, I'm going to take you on a little personal journey with me to provide some benchmarks. And as I share my benchmarks, think of your own at a similar time. So allow me to take you back to my first engagement with textbook companies. This happened long before I became a teacher. It was the moment I had anticipated. Oh my goodness, I was excited. I was ready with high spirits because it was the moment where American Indian people were part of the curriculum. What was that moment? It was junior high school United States history. Holy cow, I was eager for the class And I was so optimistic. I was so excited. I actually remember the feeling. Unfortunately, it was disappointing. And as the class went on, it was demoralizing. I couldn't let the situation continue, and so I raised my hand. Well, the teacher called on me, and I informed the teacher that the textbook was incorrect. And then I went on to provide the correct content. Well, I was then quickly and maybe not so discreetly removed from the classroom. And I was made to sit in a chair in the hallway. They called my mom at work, and she had to come and talk to the teacher before I would be allowed back into the classroom. I don't know what my mom said to the teacher. I don't know what the teacher said to my mom. We never talked about it. I only knew that the teacher never spoke of it again. I never contradicted the textbook again. I never contradicted the teacher again. And I never forgot that moment. That was a while ago. I am 65 years old now. But all of you must recall US history from junior high, from high school, and even college. So take a brief moment from your own educational experience to recall the content that you learned on American Indians. Was it relations with the colonists, good and bad? Was it the Bering Land Bridge and the Indian Wars? If I were together with you, I would ask some of you to share. Maybe that history was more expansive. Certainly one would expect that in college. I recall my college history class, and the instructor stood at the front of the class, and he stated that this was US history from a white person's perspective. That was the beginning of the first lecture. And so every paper that we had to write in that class, I made sure to write a paper about federal Indian policy or some other Native issue. It was my own little act of resistance. I don't think he appreciated it, but I passed the class. Were you ever introduced to a primary source authored by an Indian, or a book authored by an American Indian, an Alaska Native, a Native Hawaiian, Kanaka Maoli? I didn't read anything written by a Native American author until I was an adult. Have you read a book written by a Native author? When? What was the author's name? What was the content of that book? When I read a book by a Native author, it was transformative. Now let's fast forward. That was my school experience in junior high and high school and college. So let's fast forward to my experience as a teacher. My first teaching position, I was hired through a bilingual grant to teach a culture class to grades K through 4, and there were over 400 students. So I saw those students in an 8-day rotational cycle. I'd have the classes, a first grade class for 2 days, second grade, anyway. It was a very busy schedule. My task for this bilingual program was to integrate some Salish language with some history and some cultural content, with the idea that it would engage Indian students, provide relevant and meaningful curriculum so that the activities would build literacy development. Well, there was no curriculum, there weren't any materials, and there wasn't even a classroom, but there was a hallway with 2 lunch tables, and so that's where I taught. It was a little bit difficult because that's also the hallway where teachers lined their students up to go to recess. And so trying to keep the attention of first graders while all the other kids are lined up going to recess was really challenging. But honestly, I was terrified. I knew only a few words in Salish, and the history that I knew was above elementary grades, I don't think I was going to talk to them about treaty law. I did know some coyote stories. I was woefully inadequate and underprepared for the job. And so I turned to gracious people in my community, like Clarence Woodcock, Francis Vandenberg, Lucy Vandenberg, Annie Bunce, Roy Big Crane, and so many people who really helped me. It was humbling, but it was also empowering. And I actually began to have some fun, even though I was writing lessons the week before I taught them. Okay, that was in 1990. At that time, I had a third grade student who was not Indian, but he was intent on having an Indian name. Now, I don't know what books or movies he was watching, but he had it in his mind that he was going to have an Indian name. And so he pestered me about it daily. He'd write me notes, write me letters, and leave them on my desk. He drew so many pictures of Native warriors, always autographed and with a note on them saying, please, would you give me an Indian name? And so I sat and talked with him and I said, you know, naming somebody is really a family responsibility, you know, or people that are connected to your family. I can't give you an Indian name. And I knew that if I started giving kids Indian names, it would open an enormous can of worms in the non-Indian community and in the Indian community. But I also didn't want to discourage this young person. He was adamant about getting an Indian name, and I could see that all of his library books, everything he was reading, it was all about Indians. So not knowing what to do, once again, I asked Clarence Woodcock for help. So remember, you are not in this work alone. There are many generous people who will help you. You do not have to do this alone. Please don't think that you're in this alone. Well, Clarence came to my class and he told the story about how all of the animals got their names. And in that story, Coyote, of course, was the last one to get his name, and he was trying to bargain with the other animals for their names. Well, at the end of the class, we asked this student to stay after for a minute. And Clarence talked to him and told him the Salish way of saying his name. And he was thrilled. Matia. By the way, when that young man graduated from high school, he was the only graduate wearing moccasins. I know that because I was on the stage giving beaded bags to all the graduates. Good for you, Matia. Well, the whole situation inspired me to do a unit on names and explore naming traditions from different cultures and just talk about names. Everybody loves their name. Kids love to talk about their name. So I sent a letter home to parents and asked about nicknames, asked about namesakes, were they named for a relative or a friend, and asked about moments in their life when names changed. So I sent the letters, got a lot of them back, and then I got a stack of baby name books. Now this was pre-Google, right? Now you can just go online and find out a name, meaning, well, I had to go through all these books and try to find the meaning of all the kids, 400 plus kids, their names. But I did, I found most of them. Now some parents made their own name for their kids, but then we learned that and why. And so at the end of the unit, I baked sugar cookies and I wrote every student's name on it in frosting. And we had a celebration of names. And so with each class, I'd say, you know, Susan has a special name, and the kids would clap. And then I'd say what we had learned about Susan's name and so on. And we went through that. Does that sound like fun for elementary kids? Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It would be fun for adults. Well, it was so much fun. And I was thinking, I'm really onto something with teaching. Remember, this was like my first year. Until a day into the celebration, the secretary called me to the office and she gave me a list of students from the different classes that would not be attending the ceremony. Ceremony? What is she talking about? Well, I came to find out that some parents believed that I was holding a naming ceremony of some sort with all of the classes, and they didn't want their child participating in a ceremony. Wow. In small towns, news spreads fast. And most often, it's inaccurate. Well, at this point in my culture class, I began to get a series of unannounced drop-in visitors, school board members, local clergy, miscellaneous parents, etc. And the local newspaper wrote an article about my class, and the title of it was Teaching Religion with a big question mark. When I was hired for this teaching position in this bilingual program, I asked the principal, Terry O'Fallon, if she thought the community was ready for this, was ready for a culture class that would be taught to all the students, Indian students, non-Indian students, everybody. It wasn't an elective. It wasn't optional. Everybody would come through my class. Well, she said yes. She said she'd been doing a lot of work and talking with parents. And Terry was the first principal that I taught under. And her leadership was visionary. I was blessed to have her as my first educational leader. She taught me leadership principles of inspiring a shared vision, challenging the process, empowering others to act, modeling the way, and encouraging the heart. And she did all of that with me. Well, Terry paid an enormous cost for her vision and commitment to equity for all students. The last year of my teaching in that program, she had been removed from the principal position and designated a grant director. The next year, she left. She went on to get a PhD and has continued visionary work. Folks, I'm telling you that to remind you that people have paid a price to where we are today. We're standing on the shoulders of the efforts and costs that people have paid for us to be here. But let's go back to the early 90s with another story. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Phil Lucas. He's a Choctaw filmmaker. Well, you know, I had no curriculum, no material, so I was always scouring and looking, and I came upon an animated film series called Walking with Grandfather. Perfect. I was so excited. I couldn't believe it. It's like, who is this guy and how did this happen? And it was so new and cutting edge to have native stories and animated and beautiful music. And so I got a copy. And my favorite story in that series was Great Wolf, Little Mouse Sister. And so the story begins with Great Wolf and he's crying because he has lost his eyes and can't see. So Little Mouse Sister hears Great Wolf crying and she says she wants to help him. But Great Wolf laughs at her and says, well, who are you? You're just a little mouse. How can you help me, the Great Wolf? Well, Little Mouse Sister says, here's how I can help you. And she gives her eyes to Great Wolf. And that starts compassion, reignites compassion in Great Wolf. And then they begin this trek to the sacred lake so that maybe the Little Mouse Sister could get sight. The story ends with the Little Mouse Sister getting the blessing of becoming an eagle. The kids love that story. And after they'd watch it, we do a story map with little captions and pictures. And we talk about what are the stories and lessons that we learned from that relationship. Kindness, compassion, generosity. Well, during one of these classes, when I showed the movie and was doing the story map and discussion, I had one of my drop-in guests, you know, those unannounced visitors. Well, several days later, I was called into the principal's office. And it doesn't matter how old you are, when you get called into the principal's office, it makes you nervous and feel like you're a little kid again. Well, he told me that I was to turn over the film that I was showing. I was to bring it over to the superintendent's office. And then he said that the superintendent would be watching that film with the school board. Ooh. Well, and then the principal warned me that I had been accused of teaching reincarnation. Wow. I guess that was construed from the little mouse sister becoming an eagle. Well, the superintendent and the school board did watch the film. And the following day, the principal told me to go to the superintendent's office. And I was very nervous and I was unsure of what was going to happen because obviously I was aware that there was a big controversy brewing. And I had had many settings in PTA meetings and school assemblies where I was confronted by members of the community about why their children had to learn this Indian stuff. And my response was, well, we live on the Flathead Indian Reservation that is home to the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. And since this is our homeland, there's an expectation that we would learn the history of the place and people where we live. The same as if I was teaching in France, I would be expected to know French history, right? Well, I knew that that was happening. And so I really didn't know how the superintendent was going to deal with the issue. But I went over to his office and he said that the school board had indeed watched the film, Great Wolf, Little Mouse Sister. And what do you think? They thought it was a wonderful story and did a fabulous job of teaching good values. And they told the superintendent to tell me, good job. So I could share so many stories with you about similar situations where people did the good thing, people did the right thing, people did not, where I did things right and where I did things wrong because I was learning along with my students. And my own sophistication of learning how to teach my own history and other tribal histories was just starting. I was questioned by the non-Indian community repeatedly. And I was questioned by my own community. Again, it was humbling, but it was empowering. And I'm sharing these personal experiences with you because I want to give you a tangible picture of where things were at in the early 1990s so that you have kind of a continuum to see how far we've come and to really get an understanding of what it was like for people who are trying to teach. Now, we'd had the Indian Studies law and all of that, but things really hadn't changed in the public school systems. So let's move forward a few years to 1998. Now, I was at this time working for my tribe's education department as a curriculum specialist. Montana House Bill 528 was introduced by Representative Carol Juneau and 20 other state legislators. And truthfully, I didn't expect it to pass. And it did. And now we all know Montana Code Annotated 20-1-501 as Indian Education for All. And I hesitate to say it, but I'm going to. It feels a bit like we are taking it for granted. And folks, let me tell you, it was hard won. And it started way before 1998. It started at the Constitutional Convention, and it even started there, but it came to a climactic point at the Constitutional Convention in 1972 with 0 Indian delegates. So how in the world did this beautiful language in Article 10 come to be? The state of Montana recognizes the distinct and unique cultural heritage of American Indians and is committed in its educational goals to the preservation of their cultural heritage. That is powerful language. I believe that we are the only state to have such language. And if you think of that time that that language was crafted, this was 1972. Just think about that. Think about that. Well, there weren't any Indian delegates, but there were Indians at the convention. And those Indian people were giving testimony. In 2012, I had the good fortune to interview Delegate Dorothy Eck at her home. And I asked her, I said, Dorothy, how in the world were you able to come together and come to an agreement to include this really specific language in the Constitution? And she responded unequivocally, it was the Indian high school students. Now, thanks to Mike Jetty, I now know two of those students' names. Diana Bighorn, who was at the time Diana Loop, and the late Mavis Scott, both students from Poplar High School. I had an email exchange with Diana this last week, and I got to finally, something I should have done years ago, to thank her, to just say thank you for what you did. You know, I have benefited from it. My kids have benefited from it. My grandchildren are benefiting from it. And she remarked that she was proud of what she had done. And she's more proud that her youngest daughter has a Class 7 teaching certificate. And she's assisting the Dakota language instructor at their college. We have come a long way from 1990 to Indian Ed for All. And our state made history with the passage of House Bill 528. And we have made history trying to implement it. The Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian used the essential understandings regarding Montana Indians as a template to create their own from a national perspective. I believe ours are exemplary. And I'm not saying that because I was present. There were a lot of people at that gathering, and I was facilitating. But I believe our essential understandings are exemplary because they go beyond content benchmarks. They examine 4 essential concepts: tribal diversity, history and power, living cultures, and tribal sovereignty. Those are heady topics that you folks are willing to take on in your continued commitment to an integrated curriculum that is meaningful, that is inclusive, and that is just. Indian education for all, it can't be compared to a new science curriculum or a reading program. This is justice work. It's reconciliation. It's truth-telling. Angela Davis remarked that victories in social justice are never permanent. We must remain vigilant. And we must. There is a growing movement to return to a selective history, a movement to return to a single story. And America is many stories, and each one has contributed to who America is. Every story deserves to be told. It is part of our country's history. There is power and redemption in truth-telling. And the larger story of America must be told for our country to realize herself as a moral leader in democracy. Now, we started on this journey together, all of us as leaders, in a moment that Howard Zinn called a fugitive moment of compassion, when people come together for good. And other states have looked to our leadership. We had Indian educators from the state of Washington coming to all of the OPI-sponsored workshops, tribal workshops, reading the language in our Constitution, reading Montana Code Annotated 20-1-501, talking with us. They worked very hard to get something done in their state. And they now have a state-approved curriculum since time immemorial that is approved for all schools. I don't believe what they got was as powerful as what we have done, but they accomplished something. And they did that working with us. And that's powerful. Remember when I said, when we put our minds and hearts together, we become an exponential force for good? That's what I mean. That's what can happen. Now, other states have followed in some fashion or another. And I know that the state of Wisconsin was doing this, I think, before we were. So I don't want to discount that there was something already happening. But we remain in a leadership role. And this is a historic moment, and people are documenting it in articles and in books. And so I would say to you, each of you individually, and maybe collectively as a school, what is your page in this history going to say? Or are you going to have a whole chapter? We have come so far. Remember the personal examples I related. If someone was doing any of those things that I was in the 1990s now, would they be called into the superintendent's office? I don't think so. I think we have come a long way, and we need to celebrate that. And that is in thanks to your effort and your work. I mean, it was controversial in the 90s when a school dared to have a Native Studies class. I taught a high school Native Studies class, and I told those kids, those students, I would have loved to have had this class. You need to appreciate and thank your parents and your grandparents and the community who worked hard so that you could have this class. I would have loved to have been in a Native Studies class. Or I would have loved to have read a book authored by a Native person in English literature. My first 3 years of teaching were a constant effort to legitimize lessons and activities. My last year, I started filing my lesson plans weeks in advance so that they could be reviewed to see if there was any controversial content. I actually had to read up on my right to teach as a teacher. And you can teach. You cannot separate spiritual perspectives from our cultures. And we have the right to teach about religion. Now, that's very different from proselytizing. But I had to read up on my right as a teacher. When my mother was on the Indian Parent Committee, they weren't allowed to meet in school facilities. So they met in a tribal building. Now, can you imagine that being the circumstance today? No, we probably can't. And perhaps some of you are young enough that you don't remember pre-Indian education for all. The challenges to educators and Indian families were standing on the shoulders of generations of people who struggled for the opportunities that we have today. And many of you are leveraging those to their full extent. Lessons and materials have shifted beyond heroes, holidays, and crafts to content with deeper meaning. And you are making wise and critical choices. The Indian Land Tenure Foundation developed a curriculum, and they decided the best place to implement that curriculum would be in Montana. Why? Because we were in the leading role to implement American Indian content. And so they talked with OPI, and OPI helped them make contact with schools and teachers, and they previewed the curriculum with Montana teachers. And they were stunned when most of the teachers said, we can't use these materials. They are not tribally specific. Indeed, when I reviewed the materials, they were very pan-Indian, but I was so proud of the sophistication and the confidence of Montana teachers to give that response to an Indian organization, that the Land Tenure Foundation were floored. They thought it was so awesome. But friends, remember the wise words of Angela Davis. We know that we still have a long way to go. We're not there yet. And there are some teachers who maybe are doing this work isolated in their school building. Or there may be an administrator who is doing this isolated within their leadership team. And so I applaud you and I encourage you to keep going. Stay the course, stay the course. And remember, you are not in this alone. I have never not replied to an educator in an email or phone call because I respect and honor the work that you do, and I know the power of it, and I know the significance of it. Well, in 2015, OPI had somebody do a study on the implementation of Indian Ed for All. 20 school districts were invited, 2 declined, 3 were unresponsive. And so the data I'm sharing is from the 15 willing school districts, but 3 of the 15 didn't complete everything. And so I'm just going to go through a few of those things. And I'm going to save some time. We'll have some time at the end for some hopefully chatting conversation and questions and answers. And I apologize that we're not in a room together so that we could interact, because I think this should be a discussion rather than a lecture. I could learn from you. We need to learn from each other. Well, in this 2015 survey, one of the survey questions dealt with familiarity with the goals and intentions of Indian Ed for All. Very familiar, 25.4% of the respondents. Moderately familiar, 37.2%. A little, 26%. Not at all, 8.1%. Wow, so 23 years later, how can 34% of the educators in a Montana school know very little about the purpose of Indian Ed for All? The next obvious question is, who is responsible to make certain this is not the case? And I would say it is all of us. We all have to own this. OPI can't do it alone. Native teachers can't do it alone. Tribal ed departs can't do it alone. We need each other. We need each other to get this done. And we need to support each other and collaborate with each other and encourage each other and go back to those leadership principles, challenging the process, inspiring a shared vision, modeling the way, empowering others to act, and encouraging the heart. Another survey question, frequency of American Indian content integration. Never, 10.5%. Once a year, 29%. Once a year and never combined, 39%. Once a month, 30%. At least once a week or daily, 28%. Yay! So I celebrate the once a monthers and the once a weekers and the once a dayers, But I asked myself, why? Why do we have 39.5% of the teachers respondents saying never or once a year? Why? Why? What do you need? What can I do for you? What can we do for you? How can we help? Perhaps these teachers do not have the content background. We can't teach what we don't know. After all, where has this content been provided? I told you my story of what I got in, public school. It wasn't a lot. How much has that changed? How much are teachers getting? And what about in their teacher ed programs? Maybe a single multicultural class or an Indian ed class. A single class is not enough to equip you to implement Indian ed for all. And so this is a challenge and a plea to the state's teacher education programs. You can do more. Please do more. People will help you. We will help you. We will partner with you. We will collaborate with you. Teacher education programs need to do more, and not just in Montana. Nationally, I've read AERA's reports on teacher education, and teachers nationally feel like they are not equipped to teach in a multicultural classroom. Their ed program is not equipping them for it. What about professional development? There was a survey where teachers reported that the most significant place that they got Indian Ed for All support was through their district's professional development. 24% of the teachers reported they had no professional development in their district for Indian education. 24%. So educational leaders, district educational leaders, please do more. We will help you. We will work together. We will partner. We will support you. We will collaborate with you. Please do more. Teachers need your support. They need your leadership. They need you to empower them. They need you to encourage their heart. The next source of support that was significant after district professional development that teachers reported was their colleagues. So hooray. When you share with your colleagues, you're making a difference. Keep sharing. Keep doing what you're doing. Now, the final survey point I would like to make is related to the fabulous OPI Indian Ed for All resources. Now, I wish the website was a little different organized because I have a hard time finding things. But if you keep digging, you'll find amazing things. And if you can't find something, email Mike Jetty or Jennifer Statham, and they will help you find something. There's fabulous things on there. You could exhaust all of that and never get to the end probably of your teaching career. And these are available for free. Unfortunately, the survey reported 19% of the teacher respondents didn't even know about it. They didn't even know about the Indian Ed for All resources on OPI's website. Why? Why didn't they know? 22% said they never access it. This is an unutilized, powerful resource. Now, I could go on with the rest of the report, but you can find it on OPI's website. I couldn't find it, actually. Mike Jetty had to send me a link. I knew the report existed, and I looked, and I could not find it. And so I finally had to ask Mike, and he sent me a link. Now, it was 2015, and that is a bit dated. but I would predict that those results have held fairly steady. What do you think? If we were together, I would have a discussion on this. What do you think? Are things better? Are they? And what should we do? So I'm leaving you with applause, but I'm also leaving you with questions and a reminder that we still have a lot to do. So my hope today was to celebrate how far we've come and to encourage your heart to stay the course, stay the course. And so often we may be doing this work in isolation. And I know that some of you are doing this work with little support from administration or little support from your colleagues, or maybe even criticism. And sometimes we do something wrong, but that's okay because we're learning. And when we make a mistake, we really learn from it. And it's okay. I've made mistakes. We have all made mistakes. That's part of our learning. The important part is to learn and to keep on the journey. And we need to be kind to each other, and we need to be loving and supportive. Because remember, this is justice work. It's reconciliation. It is truth-telling. This is powerful work we're engaged in. I will always answer a request from a teacher or educator. And my last challenge, at the beginning I said, so we had the law now for 23 years. And I do feel like we are taking it for granted. If you're waiting for OPI to write every one of your lesson plans or to deliver all of your content, don't wait for them. They do not have enough staff. They do not have all the knowledge of every tribe in the state to do that. They are doing what they can, and they're doing a lot. And so my last challenge really is to the Indian community in Montana. Who can tell our story? Who should tell our story? Who needs to provide this content? We do. We need to tell our story. Until we can tell our story, until we provide teachers these resources, we really can't criticize anybody. And this is not going to move forward. Indian country in Montana, we have to step up. And we have to start producing materials that are teacher friendly. And we have to start partnering with schools. And I know it's hard, and I know it's difficult. And I've been there. I've been there in the school board meetings, and I've been there in the assemblies with people angry at you. But we have to stay the course. And we don't need to go in alone. Bring in an ally. So Indian country, we have to step it up. Because we are the best people to tell our stories. We are the partners the schools need. And it's for our kids. That is where our kids are going to school. We can make a difference. Remember what I said in the beginning, when we put our minds and hearts together, then we become an exponential force for good. So I would close my time with you, I guess, with a question and a statement. The question is, can you recall the reasons you chose education? Why did you choose education for a career? Maybe education chose you. I believe most of us chose education with the intention of making a difference in the life of a young person. And I wanted to support young persons learning not just about history and culture or science or literature, but I also wanted to support their learning about themselves, about who they are, and the big human issues outside the classroom door. Our lessons need to have relevance outside the classroom door. And as we look outside the classrooms in towns and schools, we see the challenge before us. Folks, there are two big crises that face all of us, no matter where we are in the world. Two big crises. And how are we going to equip students, young people, to face those crises? Those crises are our failed relationship with this beautiful earth that gives us life, and our failed relationship with each other. And Indian Education for All has much to offer both crises. For the earth, ways of perceiving and living on the land that are life-affirming and sustaining. I am proud of my tribe's conservation record that weaves traditional values with contemporary stewardship. And you will find that with every tribe in the state. For each other, we live in divided communities. We live in a divided states, in a divided country. And civic discourse is at an all-time low. And many are choosing to listen to debate rather than listen to understand. And it has become more difficult to reach across differences. And so the journey that we have embarked upon as educators has forged relationships across differences in our communities and across the state. Intertribally also. We are building trust, and we are building our humanity. And this journey requires all of us. None of us can go it alone, and we cannot afford to tarry. Our children, our grandchildren will be the benefactors of our actions. The next generation will live in the world we leave them. President Clinton remarked that America is always on a journey, always becoming. What would you have America become? I invite you to imagine with me a just society that has room for all. Thank you for the work that you do. And please know that it is important. Please believe that you are making a difference. And when you feel doubt seep in, remember the high school students that went to the Constitutional Convention and raised their voices. Please continue to raise yours. The state of Montana recognizes the distinct and unique cultural heritage of American Indians and is committed in its educational goals to the preservation of their cultural heritage. May it be so. Lemlech, thank you.
Oh, Lemlech, Julie, that was so inspiring. And I'm just, what a perfect way to launch the conference. Thank you so much. We do have a couple of comments in the chat, and I'll give you the love before I get to the question. My IEFA education started when I was a para at KWH with Julie. Precious, precious memories of her teaching our students to love themselves, each other, and have compassion for all. My own children were so blessed to be in her first classes. Her joy and excitement for learning was always and still so infectious. I also remember crying my heart out at the end of the year powwow when I knew she wouldn't be with us the following year as she was taking a new job. My heart still rejoices every time I get to see Julie, and especially when I get to hear her speak. Lemlech, love and blessings, Julie, for speaking into my life and for all you have done for our children, educators, and Indian Ed for All. And of course, that's Peg Rowe. And I asked if I could share that. Julie, I thank you for all your work. Thank you for being my mentor, my role model, and most importantly, my biggest cheerleader. I am so blessed to have a wonderful woman on my side. Thank you so much. That's Nicole. Let's see. Amy is acknowledging Ani and Miigwech and I don't know how to pronounce the second word, Amy, I'm sorry. It is always a pleasure and honor to work with you, listen, and to learn from you. And lots of thanks, you. So we only have 3 more minutes left, Julie.
Oh,
So
wow.
in 3 minutes or less, can you please clarify teaching religious content? I teach high school art, and over the years, I have developed an extensive ledger art unit. When I developed the unit, I was told to avoid any religious content. So should I allow religious content in my unit of study?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really good question. I only have a few minutes, so I'm going to talk really fast. So I think that we can talk about spiritual beliefs. I think that maybe the administration are uncomfortable about representing particular spiritual ceremonial practices. And so that's probably it. I think you can absolutely talk about religious belief and religious perspective. And you can there is a book about teaching religion that you can get. I'm sure it's been updated since when I read it in 1990, that will tell you exactly what you can teach. But I would visit with Indian people, and there's lots of Indian people at OPI that would be glad to collaborate with you on this, because I think it's absolutely necessary. The world, everything going on us around in the world today, you know, we can find a religious context for it. And so, yes, we need to teach about religion. Young people need to know about religious beliefs around the world. I think the reticent is not depicting a specific religious ceremony in art, in an activity that might seem trivializing it, or if you don't really understand it. So there are some things that are private.
That's a great way of putting it.
Fabulous question.
Yeah, thank you. And unfortunately, that literally is all we have time for. And so we're going to take a quick 10-minute break, but I think Zach has some words for you. And just so you know, we're going to do a 10-minute break, but the rest of the sessions, it's only 5 minutes in between the sessions. So we really hope to see you at as many sessions as possible. We also hope to see you at the awards. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Julie, for being here and providing all of us not only inspiration, but challenge to continue doing this work, better, and to continue helping all Montanans understand who Montana's first people were and are today. And thank you. We do know that we need to work on our website, but I do appreciate that. We have so much stuff, it's hard to get it all organized, but